I want you to do something for a second, just right where you are.
Yeah, whatever you're doing right now.
Exactly, just pause. Leave this deep dive playing, obviously, but shift your attention away from my voice for a moment and just listen to the room you're in.
Really listen to it.
What do you actually hear? Maybe it's, I don't know, the low, steady hum of a refrigerator in the kitchen?
Or the AC unit kicking on.
Right, cycling on to keep the temperature down. Or maybe it's the muffled sound of traffic, like tires rolling over wet pavement outside your window.
Even if it's really quiet, you might just hear your own breath.
Yeah, the slow rhythm of your breathing, or maybe the rustle of your clothing as you shift your weight.
We usually just filter all of that out completely.
We do. We just call it background noise, or we just call it nothing.
No.
But what if those accidental noises, those hums and rattles and sighs, are actually a symphony?
It's a wild thought.
It is. What if the very idea of silence is just a total biological and physical illusion?
Because that realization, it completely upends how we move through the world.
It really does.
We spend so much of our daily lives trying to curate our audio environment, trying to block out the noise to find some pristine, quiet space.
Just so we can finally concentrate, right?
Exactly. But the moment you start actually paying attention to the silence, you realize it's incredibly loud.
It's deafening sometimes.
The world is constantly broadcasting this chaotic, overlapping soundtrack, and we're just trained to ignore it.
And breaking that training is basically the entire foundation of what we're doing today.
Absolutely.
Our mission on this deep dive is to explore the radical, mind-bending philosophy of the avant-garde composer John Cage.
Such a fascinating figure.
We're investigating how Cage completely dismantled the very definition of music, how he transitioned from writing formal compositions to embracing environmental sound, and how he quite literally weaponized the concept of silence.
Weaponized is the perfect word for it, really.
We aren't just talking about a quirky musician who did weird things on stage. We're talking about a thinker who fundamentally re-engineered how human beings experience reality.
And to map out this journey, we're pulling from a really incredible stack of sources today.
What have we got?
Well, we'll be looking closely at Jacques Attali's book, Noise, The Political Economy of Music.
That's a heavy one, but so good.
It is. It offers this deep structural look at how sound functions in society and mirrors power dynamics.
Right.
We're also diving into Douglas Kahn's Noise, Water, Meat, and Seth Kim Cohen's In the Blink of an Ear.
Both essentials for this topic.
Yeah, and we'll bring in several other critical texts on sound art and the legacy of the avant-garde, including Tara Rogers' vital sociological critique in Pink Noises.
Okay, so to really understand John Cage, I feel like we have to travel back to a very specific moment in time.
We do, 1951.
1951. Imagine stepping into a highly controlled, totally sensory-deprived environment. We're at Harvard University.
Walking right into their anechoic chamber.
Yes, the anechoic chamber. And for those who might not know, an anechoic chamber is a room engineered to basically absorb all sound.
It's a completely unnatural space.
Completely. It has these thick, waffled fiberglass wedges protruding from the walls, the floor, the ceiling.
It's designed to be acoustically dead.
Right. No echoes, no reverberation at all. It is the absolute closest thing to pure physical silence that human engineering can actually create.
And people who spend time in these rooms, they often report feeling really disoriented.
Or even panicked, right?
Yeah, panicked, because the absence of auditory feedback is just so weird for our brains.
So Cage walks in expecting to finally experience the pure void of sound.
He was seeking a baseline, He wanted to hear what nothing sounded like.
And what happens?
Well, Cage sits in this technologically perfected silence, and instead of a void, he distinctly hears two sounds.
Two sounds in a silent room.
Exactly. One is a high-pitched whine, and the other is a low, rhythmic throb.
So the room was broken.
That's what he thought. When he leaves the chamber, he goes straight to the audio engineer in charge and asks what equipment was making those noises.
Because it's supposed to be completely silent?
Right. And the engineer explains that the high-pitched sound was Cage's own nervous system in operation.
Oh my God.
And the low sound was his blood circulating through his body.
It is such a brilliant, almost sci-fi moment.
It really is.
It's kind of like turning off your television screen expecting to see a complete void, this empty abyss. But instead, you just see your own reflection staring back at you.
That is a perfect analogy. There's no escape from yourself.
You are the noise.
Exactly.
You are the noise.
Oh, okay, let's unpack this. If silence doesn't biologically exist as long as we are alive, What does that actually mean for music?
It changes everything about how we define audio and art entirely.
How so?
Well, Douglas Kahn's analysis in Noise, Water, Meat is really crucial here. He points out that the anechoic chamber proved to Cage that pure silence is merely a conceptual ideal.
Like it's just an idea, not a reality.
Right, it's an oral vanishing point. It does not exist in nature, and it certainly doesn't exist in the human body.
As Cage himself later said, until he died, there would be sounds, and they would continue after his death. But Kahn goes a step further here.
Okay, where does he take it?
He points out a third internal sound present in that room, beyond the nervous system and the blood.
Wait, I thought there were only two physiological sounds. What is the third one?
It was the sound of Cage's own cognition.
His thoughts.
Yeah, his internal voice saying, I wonder what that low sound is. What's that high sound?
Oh, wow.
The very act of perceiving and questioning the environment generates a kind of cognitive noise.
So you literally cannot separate the listener from the listening environment.
Exactly. The observer changes the observed simply by analyzing it.
That is wild.
And this realization in the Harvard anechoic chamber birthed Cage's foundational aesthetic myth. It became his guiding philosophy.
Which is what exactly?
Let sounds be themselves.
Let sounds be themselves.
Right. If silence is impossible, and sounds are always happening naturally all around us, then the composer's job is no longer to artificially organize sounds.
But just to draw attention to the sounds that are already occurring.
Yeah. Exactly.
Think about how this applies to you listening right now. How often do you actively seek out pure silence? To concentrate, to read, to try and relax.
People spend so much money on it.
We really do. We buy expensive noise-canceling headphones, we install soundproof windows, we put up acoustic panels.
Trying to fight the noise.
But Cage's epiphany shifts the entire goal. Instead of constantly fighting this losing battle to eliminate noise, the goal becomes accepting ambient reality.
Embracing what's there.
Yeah, the hum of the AC unit becomes just as valid, just as worthy of our attention as a violin string being plucked in a fancy concert hall.
And moving from a posture of control to a posture of reception requires a massive psychological shift.
It really does. You have to give up a lot of control.
You are no longer demanding the environment conform to your aesthetic preferences. You're opening yourself up to whatever the environment provides.
But, and this is so interesting, before Cage fully embraced the sort of Zen acceptance of environmental sound, he had a much more combative idea about silence, didn't he?
Oh, absolutely. Almost satirical.
This is one of my absolute favorite pieces of Cage trivia, because before he becomes the peaceful philosopher of ambient sound, he proposes something that is essentially a corporate prank.
A very elaborate prank.
Let's go back to 1948, so a few years before the anechoic chamber epiphany. Cage comes up with a proposal called Silent Prayer.
Right.
And he doesn't pitch this to an avant-garde art gallery or a classical symphony. He considers pitching it to the Muzak network.
Which is just incredible context. For those who don't know, the Muzak Corporation was famous for providing background music to offices and commercial spaces.
What we usually call piped-in elevator music.
Exactly. Their entire business model was built on filling empty acoustic space to subtly manipulate the mood and productivity of workers and consumers.
It's actually kind of dystopian when you think about it.
It is. They use a concept called stimulus progression, where the tempo and instrumentation of the background music would incrementally increase throughout the workday.
To counteract worker fatigue, right?
Yeah, to keep people working harder. It was the industrialization of sound.
And Cage wants to sell them 3 or 4 minutes of absolute silence.
This dead air.
He literally wants to monetize the void and broadcast it over their network. It is staggering audacity.
He's trying to sell nothing to a corporation whose entire existence relies on filling space with a manufactured something.
But why? What was the motivation behind this?
That's the critical piece.
Yeah.
According to Douglas Kahn, silent prayer was not about encouraging people to listen to their environment.
Like his later work was.
Right. This was designed as a direct disruption. It was an interruption of commercial capitalism.
Wow.
By broadcasting silence over the Muzak network, Cage intended to force a literal absence of the sound of Muzak into commercial spaces.
So he was weaponizing silence.
He was weaponizing it to break the continuous stream of consumerist audio conditioning.
It is a complete system override.
Truly.
He's using their own infrastructure, their own wires and speakers in the ceilings of department stores and factories to broadcast the negation of their product.
It's an early glimpse of Cage, using silence not as a tool for peace, but as a weapon of disruption.
He's hacking the system. Imagine being in a bustling mid-century department store, the syrupy strings of Muzak are playing, and suddenly dead air.
3 minutes of nothing.
It would force everyone to snap out of their consumer trance.
And it would be incredibly unsettling for the shoppers, which was exactly the point.
But it never actually happened, did it?
No. Silent prayer remained an unfulfilled proposal. Muzak never bought it.
Shocking.
I know, right?
Hmm.
But it wasn't until 1952 that he took this concept of structured silence, combined it with his revelation from the anechoic chamber, and brought it into the concert hall.
The big one.
Yeah, that was the year he realized what is arguably the most famous and definitely the most misunderstood piece of avant-garde music of the 20th century.
4 minutes and 33 seconds. 4 FUP 33.
The masterpiece.
Let's detail the premiere of this piece because the physical setting is so important to understanding the work.
It's essential.
It's August 1952 at the Maverick Concert Hall in Woodstock, New York. And this isn't a stuffy, sealed-off, acoustically perfect auditorium in Manhattan.
Not at all.
The Maverick Concert Hall is this rustic, barn-like structure made of wood situated right in the middle of a forest.
It has these large openings to the outdoors. It's very porous.
Exactly. So
Yeah.
the pianist, David Tudor, walks out onto the stage in front of the audience. He sits down at the piano.
The audience is waiting for him to play.
Right. He closes the wooden lid over the keys to signal the beginning of the first movement, and then he does absolutely nothing.
Nah.
He just sits there looking at a stopwatch. After a while, he opens the lid to signal the end of the movement, then closes it again to start the next.
And he does this for exactly 4 minutes and 33 seconds.
Which is wild. And the crucial thing to understand about that premiere in Woodstock is that it was absolutely not a silent performance.
Not even close. It was actually quite loud.
What were they hearing?
Well, during the first movement, the audience could hear the wind blowing through the trees outside the hall.
Because of those open doors.
Exactly. Then, during the second movement, a torrential rainstorm began, and the rain started hammering against the wooden roof of the building.
Oh, wow. So nature just totally took over.
And by the third movement, the audience themselves had become the soundtrack.
Because they were getting restless.
Yeah, they were confused, they were agitated, they were rustling their programs, shifting in their creaking wooden seats, and whispering to each other in frustration.
They're probably furious.
Oh, they were. Many walked out.
Imagine paying for a ticket, getting dressed up, sitting down, expecting a virtuoso piano performance, and the guy just stares at a stopwatch while it rains.
It's an aggressive act.
But that anger, that rustling, the rain, that was the music. That was the composition.
Exactly. And Seth Kim Cohen explores this brilliantly in his book In the Blink of an Ear.
What's his take on it?
He argues that what 4FUP 33 successfully does is relocate the site of production.
The site of production. Let's explain what that means in a traditional sense first.
Sure. Traditionally, in Western music, the site of production is the composer who writes the score and the performer who plays the instrument.
They are generating the art.
Right. And the listener is just a passive receptor situated at the site of audition.
You just sit there and receive it.
But Kim Cohen points out that 4FUP 33 flips this dynamic entirely.
By removing the performer's sound.
Yes. By removing the intentional sounds of the performer, Cage forces the listener to become the active creator of the music.
Because you have to focus on something.
Right. The listener has to fill the empty temporal space with their own perception of the ambient sounds. The act of listening becomes the act of composing.
The site of production moves from the stage to the audience. That is so powerful.
It is.
And you aren't just sitting there alone with your thoughts. You're sitting in a room full of other people who are also sitting in the quiet.
Which creates a totally different dynamic.
It creates what sound theorists call the listener-to-listener relationship.
When the designated performer on stage stops making sound, you suddenly become acutely aware of the presence of everyone else around you.
You hear their breathing, their discomfort, their movements.
Silence in a group setting draws profound attention to the collective body. You realize you are sharing space.
And there is a deeply moving example of this from later on, right? The art collective, Ultra Red.
Yes, Ultra Red. Between 2005 and 2008, they conducted a series of performances called Silent Listen.
Which were organized around AIDS advocacy, correct?
That's right. They would perform 4FUP 33 in various spaces, museums, community centers, galleries.
Just doing the Cage piece.
Doing the piece. And after the 4.5 minutes were up, they would pass a microphone around the audience and simply ask, "What did you hear?"
Wow. That is a staggering prompt.
It completely changes the context.
Because suddenly, the silence isn't an abstract artistic exercise anymore. It becomes a diagnostic tool for the community.
Exactly. The question, what did you hear, mapped the social space of the room.
What kind of things did people say?
People would describe how the silence made them aware of the architecture, the sounds of the city outside. But mostly, it made them aware of each other.
Right.
It highlighted who was in the room, and crucially for AIDS advocacy, who was missing from the room.
Oh, man. That gives me chills.
It showed that 4'33" isn't just about perceiving environmental sounds. It composes listening as a collective experience in its raw potential.
It reveals the shared grief.
The competing frames of reference, the grief, and the political investments of the people sharing that physical space.
So that transition from a piano piece in Woodstock to AIDS advocacy in the 2000s, it really shows us that noise and silence are never just about acoustics.
Never.
They are fundamentally about power, which brings us directly to the work of Jacques Attali.
The French economic theorist.
Yes, who wrote Noise, the Political Economy of Music. And I want to be clear for the listener here, whether you agree with his politics or not, Attali's lens gives us a really fascinating way to look at the power dynamics of a concert hall.
It's a very unique perspective.
We're not saying he's right or wrong, but he uses a Marxist framework to analyze the history of music, viewing sound not just as entertainment, but as a reflection of societal control.
Attali's core argument is that music is prophetic.
Prophetic in what way?
He means it doesn't just reflect society, it actually anticipates historical and economic developments.
Like it gets there first.
Exactly. He argues that all music, fundamentally, is an organization of sounds used to consolidate community and power.
It's a way of creating order out of the terrifying chaos of natural noise.
Think about the structure of Western classical music. It's a highly rigid, hierarchical code.
It perfectly mirrors the structure of an industrial capitalist factory.
It really does.
Let's break that factory metaphor down because it makes so much sense when you visualize it.
Sure.
In a traditional symphony, the composer is essentially the CEO or the owner of the factory.
Right. They hold the capital, which is the original idea.
And the conductor is middle management. They don't produce the sound themselves, but they enforce the rules and dictate the pace.
Keeping everyone in line.
Exactly. The musicians are the factory workers on the assembly line executing repetitive, highly specialized tasks.
And the musical score is the assembly line itself, dictating exactly what happens and when.
And then there's us, the audience. We are the consumers, sitting passively in the dark, purchasing the finished product.
So in that framework, John Cage is committing absolute sabotage.
He's blowing up the factory.
Pretty much. According to Attali, Cage's use of silence and environmental noise acts as a profound critique of those traditional power networks.
By removing the conductor and discarding the traditional score.
Yes, and by elevating everyday ambient noise to the level of art, Cage commits what Attali calls blasphemy against the hermetic codes of Western music.
He is dismantling the sonic hierarchy.
Everyone in the room is suddenly equal.
The listener is equal to the composer. The sound of rain is equal to the sound of a cello.
It looks like the ultimate democratization of sound.
But, and this is where I struggled with this part of Attali's book at first, on paper, it sounds like Cage achieved total liberation.
It seems that way.
Like he freed the musicians from the assembly line and he freed the audience from being passive consumers. But Attali doesn't see it as a happy ending, does he?
No, he really doesn't. He offers a very dark, almost dystopian warning here.
What's the catch?
While Cage's methods of indeterminacy and chance look like freedom on the surface, Attali argues they often function as a simulacrum of self-management.
A simulacrum, like a mere appearance of autonomy that just masks a deeper control.
Exactly. Attali points out that in these open, indeterminate compositions, the performer is often forced to simply manage chance.
What do you mean by manage chance?
Well, they might not be reading notes on a page in a traditional sense, but they are drawing lots, rolling dice, consulting stopwatches.
They're still following rules.
Right, they are still executing laws of probability. They are consigned to a new kind of powerlessness.
So they aren't really free.
Not according to Attali. He compares them to an administrator in a repetitive society. They have no true artistic autonomy. They aren't expressing their own emotions or ideas.
They're just carrying out algorithms designed by someone else.
That's it, exactly.
So instead of liberating the musician just becomes a data processor.
A human calculator, almost.
They are pulling the lever on a slot machine, but they didn't build the machine, and they don't get to keep the payout. The composer still holds the ultimate authority because the composer designed the system of chance.
And Adderley extends this warning to society at large.
It gets bigger than just music.
Much bigger. He warns that silence itself can be a tool of power. He talks about the danger of a cold, social silence.
What does a cold social silence look like?
It's a situation where people are so flooded with repetitive noise, background commodities, and algorithmic content that they no longer communicate meaningfully with one another.
Wow.
Power doesn't need to persuade you or debate you if it can simply drown you out in a sea of equivalent noises.
Or just isolate you in a cold, disconnected silence where everyone is just managing their own individual algorithms.
Precise.
That is a terrifying thought, especially when you think about how we interact with technology today. But it makes me want to look closer at the actual mechanics of Cage's work.
Let's do it.
Building off Attali's critique of the composer as an algorithmic designer, I want to know exactly how Cage went about removing his own authorial intent from his music.
The methods are fascinating.
Because how do you compose something if your stated goal is to have zero intention?
It required incredibly radical methodologies. From 1951 onward, deeply influenced by his studies of Zen Buddhism, Cage sought to completely eliminate his own ego.
His tastes, his preferences, everything.
All of it. He didn't want to tell the sounds what to do. He wanted to let the sounds simply be themselves.
So how did he do that?
To achieve non-intention, he needed to invent systems that would make the musical decisions for him.
And he turned to some pretty wild systems. We aren't talking about typical music theory or studying Bach counterpoint here.
Oh, no. His most famous tool during this period was the I Ching, the ancient Chinese book of changes.
Okay, how does he use an ancient oracle text to write music?
So, to compose his piece, Music of Changes, in 1951, Cage didn't just sit at the piano and wait for inspiration. He constructed massive, mathematically complex matrices of possibilities.
Matrices of notes.
Yeah. The I Ching is built on 64 hexagrams. Cage created enormous charts mapping out different pitches, durations, and dynamics.
And
Then he would toss 3 coins to generate a number, consult the corresponding hexagram in the I Ching, and map that result onto his musical charts.
let's really visualize the labor here. He is standing in his studio, tossing coins over and over and over again.
For hours.
Every single note, every rest, every volume change is determined by a coin toss.
It's exhausting just to think about.
He spent months doing the most tedious, exhausting manual labor imaginable just to guarantee that his own personal preferences didn't make a single decision.
And he constantly invented new ways to bypass his own choices. It wasn't just coin.
What else did he use?
For a piece called Atlas Eclipticalis, he took astronomical star maps and placed transparent musical staves over them.
No way.
Yes, wherever a printed star appeared on the map, he wrote a note. The constellations literally dictated the melody.
That's beautiful, but also completely random.
Exactly. For another piece, Music for Piano, he looked closely at the random imperfections and blemishes on blank sheets of paper and placed musical notes wherever there was a speck of dirt or a paper flaw.
He's composing with dust.
Literally. And for Imaginary Landscape number 4, the instruments aren't traditional at all. There are 12 radios.
12 radios being played by performers.
Right. The performers are instructed to turn the tuning dials and volume knobs to specific frequencies at specific times based on a score generated by chance.
So they don't even know what sound is going to come out.
No idea.
Yeah.
Whatever happens to be broadcasting on that radio station at the exact moment in whatever city they're performing in, a news report, static, a pop song, a commercial, that becomes the music.
It's like building a beautifully intricate, highly engineered roller coaster, but having absolutely no idea where the track leads.
Exactly.
The architecture is deliberate, the construction is meticulous, but the experience of writing it is totally unpredictable.
That analogy perfectly captures a fascinating contradiction in Cage's work, which critics like Dick Higgins have pointed out.
What's the contradiction?
Cage achieved non-intention by creating incredibly rigid dictatorial systems.
Right.
To remove his ego from the final product, he had to completely control the process. He designed the charts, he chose the star maps, he specified the exact stopwatch timings.
So he accepted the random results without changing a single note, but the apparatus generating those results was tightly controlled.
Very tightly controlled.
He's like the ultimate micromanager of randomness. He is dictating the exact terms of the chaos.
It's helpful to distinguish here between composition and performance.
Okay, break that down.
As Cage himself categorized it, a piece, like Music of Changes, is indeterminate in its composition, because the notes were chosen by coin tosses over several months.
Right.
but it is highly determinate in its performance. Once those coin tosses dictated the score, the pianist has to play exactly what is written on the page, with extreme, almost impossible precision.
Because it's a fixed score, even if it was made by chance.
Exactly. David Tudor, who premiered Music of Changes, had to practice for months because the rhythms generated by the coins were so complex.
I can imagine.
They were so disconnected from human phrasing or breathing that they were incredibly unnatural for human hands to play. Tudor was essentially trying to perform as a machine.
But later on, the avant-garde pushed this even further, didn't they?
Oh, definitely. Graphic scores by composers like Cornelius Cardew, inverting Cage's relationship between composition and performance.
How so?
Cardew would give the performer a piece of paper with abstract shapes, intersecting lines, and geometric symbols. No traditional musical notes at all.
So what does the performer do with that?
Well, in that case, the composition is fixed as a drawing, but the performance is entirely indeterminate.
I just guess.
The player has to interpret what a squiggly line means in real time. Do I play a loud chord? Do I scrape the strings? Do I shout? It leaves the performance entirely up to the player's intuition.
So we see this total dematerialization of the musical object.
Completely.
We go from Beethoven writing every single dynamic shift and tempo change, to Cage flipping coins to generate a complex score, to Cardew just handing you a drawing of a triangle and a circle.
It's a massive evolution.
If everything we do is music, as Cage implied, where do we go next? How did this philosophy affect the artists who came after him in the 1960s and beyond?
It blew the doors wide open. Cage's philosophy directly birthed the Fluxus movement in the 1960s.
Fluxus, tell us about them.
Fluxus was an international, interdisciplinary community of artists, composers, and designers who believed that art should not be a precious commodity locked away in museums.
But something integrated into everyday life?
Exactly. They relied heavily on text scores or instruction pieces, which were simple written prompts that anyone could perform. Art became everyday action.
What's a good example of that?
A great example of this evolution is Cage's own piece from 1962 titled 000.
0 minutes and 0 seconds? That sounds like the logical sequel to Forfeit 33.
It really is. The score for 000 consists of a single, simple sentence. In a situation with maximum amplification, perform a discipline action.
That's the entire piece of music.
That's it. For the premiere, Cage attached a contact microphone to his pen and simply sat at a desk on stage and wrote out the sentence of the score.
Wow.
The scratching of his pen on the paper, amplified massively through massive speakers, was the music. He completely erased the line between living and performing.
So making your morning coffee could be a symphony if you put a contact microphone on the coffee grinder and the boiling kettle.
Exactly.
It's a brilliant democratization of art. It says that anyone can be a performer and any sound can be music.
It's very inclusive in theory.
But, and I think we need to pause here, because while it sounds incredibly egalitarian, it brings up a really necessary critique. When we say any sound is music, who actually benefits from that definition?
That is the big question. And this is where we need to bring in Tara Rogers and her vital sociological critique from her book Pink Noises.
What does she argue?
Rogers acknowledges that Cage's work was absolutely groundbreaking for the avant-garde. It changed the trajectory of 20th century art.
Sure, nobody denies his influence.
However, she points out a significant blind spot in how history has recorded this era and how we talk about silence.
What's the blind spot?
The academic elevation of Cage's silence as the ultimate pinnacle achievement of experimental music has inadvertently worked to marginalize the contributions of others.
Specifically who?
Specifically women and people of color in electronic and experimental music.
Because music history tends to organize itself around one specific type of genius?
Exactly. When the narrative of experimental music becomes entirely centered around a solitary white male composer discovering the void and letting sounds just naturally happen, it often ignores the artists who are actively engineering new sounds.
It overlooks the women who are building early synthesizers.
Yes, or the marginalized communities who are using noise and amplification as a direct, necessary form of social resistance.
That makes so much sense. If we really unpack it, claiming silence and non-intention as your artistic identity requires a massive amount of cultural privilege.
It really does.
Think about it. It is the privilege to be able to step back, fold your hands, and let the world just happen to you without consequence.
Because the world isn't hostile to you.
Right. You can only practice non-intention if the default state of the world isn't actively trying to crush you or ignore you.
Absolutely.
For communities that have historically had to fight, to scream, to protest, simply to have their voices heard over the noise of the dominant culture, silence isn't an artistic liberation. It's oppression.
That is a crucial distinction. The choice to be silent, the choice to simply listen, is a luxury.
A huge luxury.
For many, noise is a necessity for survival and visibility. Cage's anechoic epiphany is profound, but it is experienced from a specific social vantage point.
He had the institutional backing and the cultural authority to sit quietly at a piano and be called a genius.
Whereas a marginalized person doing the exact same thing would likely just be ignored.
We've covered a massive amount of ground today.
We really have.
We started in the sensory deprivation of the Harvard anechoic chamber, where Cage realized that his own nervous system and his own cognition made pure silence a biological impossibility.
We look at his audacious attempt to weaponize music with silent prayer.
Right, trying to force capitalism to broadcast its own absence.
We examined how 4'33" created a space for collective listener-to-listener awareness, turning the audience into the composers of their own experience.
We navigated the dark warnings of Jacques Attali, who cautioned that systems of chance might just be a new form of administrative control, masking a cold social silence.
We explored the paradox of Cage's rigid methods, the meticulous coin tosses of the I Ching, the star maps, to achieve randomness.
And finally, we examined the cultural privilege required to embrace non-intention in the first place, contrasting the luxury of silence with the necessity of noise.
It is a legacy full of beautiful contradictions.
Which is exactly why we are still talking about John Cage decades later. But as we wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave you with a final thought to mull over, building on everything we've discussed.
If we think about our modern era, we are living in a time of unprecedented audio control.
We really are. Think about how algorithmic our listening has become.
We are constantly wearing noise-canceling headphones.
We use our apps to isolate ourselves in highly curated bubbles of personalized playlists, true crime shows, and spatial audio.
We are desperately trying to block out the noise of the world and the unpredictability of shared public spaces.
We don't want to hear the traffic or the AC unit or the people sitting next to us on the train.
But by doing this, by completely sealing ourselves off in our own personalized acoustic environments, are we killing the very listener-to-listener collectivity and serendipity that Cage believed was the true essence of humanity?
Are we willingly retreating into our own artificial anechoic chambers?
It's a terrifying and beautiful question.
We have all the technology in the world, and we use it to simulate the void Cage realized didn't even exist. So my challenge to you today is simple.
What's the challenge?
When this deep dive ends, take out your headphones for just a few minutes. Don't immediately put on another playlist or another show. Don't turn on the TV.
Just listen.
Just sit in the room you're in or walk down the street and let the sounds of the world simply be themselves. You might just hear a masterpiece. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive.